Welcome to Twilight Fables, where fairy tales rot in the dark. Tonight, we follow a mermaid who trades her voice for love, but finds only bloodied stones, a silent scream, and a prince who's been waiting far too long. This is the story of the bone-tied bride. The mermaid had no name, not one she could pronounce on land at least. Beneath the surface, her voice had sung like glacial bells, silver against the black crush of the deep. Names in the undersea courts were complex things, composed of clicks and current pulses, echolocations of identity. But the world above was made for softer tongues and simpler sounds, and the humans would not care for what she had been. So she left it behind. She rose on the last full moon of the season, slicing through the kelp forests and broken ribs of shipwrecks. The water was cold enough to burn, the tide rising like a chorus behind her. Even the fish turned their glassy eyes away as she swam toward the forbidden place, the sea witch's trench. It was not a cave, nor a ruin, but something more ancient, a gaping wound in the sea floor where light never entered. The rocks wept brine, the coral grew in teeth, and at its centre floated the witch, her jellyfish veil trailing like a bridal shroud. "You come swimming, bold and raw," the witch said, voice humming through the water like a migraine. "But have you bled yet?" "I have seen the prince," the mermaid said. "He sails near the reefs and leans close to the edge, as if listening. He looks for me. I want to meet him." "And you think he'll love you?" The mermaid hesitated. "He already does. He just doesn't know it yet." The sea witch smiled without teeth. "Then let me help you, for a price." The ritual burned, not with heat, but with memory. The sea witch did not use fire or needles. She used doubt. For every inch of her tail, the mermaid surrendered. A shard of her old self was cracked off and buried beneath the spell. She was warned it would hurt, but she wasn't prepared for how real the illusion would feel. The witch wrapped her in false skin, woven from algae and ship silk. Her bones did not shift, they splintered. The tail she believed she had lost still clung to her, twitching below the surface of the illusion, but it was numb, foreign. She thought she had legs. When she looked down, she saw feet. When she stood, she screamed. But in the dreamscape of the witch's curse, she convinced herself it was the pain of change, not the lie of transformation. She crawled up the sand, retching seawater and fish rot. Her fingers bled where she'd gripped coral to pull herself ashore. Behind her, the tide rolled in thick and slow, as if reluctant to release her. It was morning. The sun blazed. The world shimmered like oil, and the prince was waiting. His name was Corwin, hair dark as kelp roots, eyes pale as barnacle shells. He wore white gloves and a smile that never reached his teeth. When his guards found her lying naked on the beach, they stepped forward to pull her away, but he stopped them. "No," he said, kneeling beside her. "She's mine." His voice didn't ask, it claimed. They wrapped her in a linen sheet, ignoring the way she hissed and recoiled from the roughness of it. Her skin blistered beneath dry touch, the wounds on her legs, a patchwork of barnacle scrapes, raw coral cuts, and salt-scoured flesh, went unnoticed. The servants saw nothing. They saw a beautiful mute girl with delicate limbs and eyes full of ocean, because the witch's spell was flawless to all but the cursed. To her, every step was agony. She limped through the castle halls, with her head bowed, smiling through cracked lips. Her legs, these fake legs, twitched with nerve fire. At night, she could still feel her tail thrashing beneath her. Sometimes she swore she could see it, dragging behind her like a phantom limb. But the prince was kind, gentle, curious, and always watching. She could not speak, not even in gesture. The witch had taken more than her voice. She'd stripped her of expression. When she tried to cry, her eyes filled with grit. When she laughed, it sounded like breath in a broken shell. The castle physicians called her frail, simple, exquisite in her suffering. The prince called her his bride. "I've waited so long for you," he said one evening, brushing a comb through her tangled hair. "I always knew the sea would give you back to me." He did not elaborate. She nodded, afraid to ask, afraid to try. In the mirror, her reflection twitched. For a half-second, it looked wrong. Her mouth too wide, her neck too long, a shadow of scales flickering across her collarbone. She blinked. It vanished. The castle was filled with strange rooms. There was the greenhouse where nothing grew, just blackened stalks in cracked pots, whispering when the wind passed. There was the music hall where a harp strung with seaweed played itself at dusk, and the bath chamber, always warm, always ready, smelling faintly of salt and iron. The prince insisted she bathe often. "You came from the sea," he said, stroking her cheek, "but I want you to smell clean." She obeyed. When the chamber was empty, she peeled back her illusion. It cracked at the base of her spine. With enough pain, enough focus, she could see through it, just a little. Her legs were not legs. They were bone-split fins, curling uselessly beneath her. Her hips were warped, her skin a translucent blue, her ribs like fish hooks beneath the surface. She was monstrous, and yet she did not scream, because he still touched her. He still kissed her cheek and called her beloved. He still danced with her in the great hall, while the nobles whispered behind gloves. He smiled like she was made of pearl, not rotting fish flesh stitched into a dream. Then came the other girls. She found the first in the tower room, hidden behind a tapestry. The scent of brine led her to a door no one else seemed to notice. It creaked. Inside, A girl sat on a stone bench, rocking gently. Her skin was paper white, eyes blank. She didn't move when the mermaid entered, didn't even blink. Her mouth had been sewn shut with kelp thread. On her legs, if they were legs, barnacles bloomed like tumours. The mermaid fled. The second was worse. In the cellar, where pickled eels and wine casks lined the walls, she saw a trail of scales. They shimmered in the dark, opalescent and wet. At the end was a body, hung from a hook, wrapped in linen. When she pulled it down, the face was too familiar, a mirror of her own. Only this one had no eyes, just black hollows, leaking seawater. She didn't sleep that night. The prince noticed. "You're quiet," he whispered, stroking her neck. "Do you remember who you were?" She shook her head. "Good," he said. "I like you better this way." He pressed a hand against her chest, feeling her heartbeat. "It's almost time. You'll stay, won't you?" She didn't answer, not because she couldn't, but because she didn't want to lie. The dream came on the 7th night. She was back in the sea, but it was wrong. The water was thick and black. The fish had no eyes. Her sisters swam past without seeing her, their mouths sewn shut, and from the abyss below, something rose, a mass of limbs and scales and voices. The sea witch. "You see it now, don't you?" she hissed. "He's not your prince. He's a collector. You weren't the first. You won't be the last." "I loved him," the mermaid tried to say, but no sound came. The witch laughed. "No, child. You loved a story, but he loved your suffering." She woke in the prince's arms. He was humming a lullaby, one she had sung to him once, long ago. From beneath the waves, he had remembered, or maybe he had never forgotten. "I heard you," he said. "The first time you sang, I knew you were made for me." She looked up at him, eyes burning. He smiled, and for the first time, she saw his teeth. Too sharp, too many. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "Happy anniversary." The mermaid didn't sleep for days after the dream. She wandered the castle halls with bare feet and aching bones, her limbs twitching from phantom pain. Her body, if it could still be called that, was unravelling beneath the surface of the witch's illusion. Every step pulled something loose. The spell was holding, but only just. She moved through a world that refused to see her suffering. The servants bowed, the chambermaids smiled, the cooks left fish-heavy platters at her door. Everyone treated her with reverence, gentleness, obedience, yet none of them saw her, not as she was, not with her skin flaking, her eyes ringed in saltburn, her legs refusing to work unless she focused every drop of her will into pretending. The illusion demanded constant belief. If she slipped, even for a moment, the rot bled through, and the prince didn't mind the rot. His name tasted bitter now. Corwin. She whispered it in her mind as she watched him from the edge of the ballroom. where he twirled alone in mock waltzes with invisible partners. His gloves had specks of something dark on them, dried brine, or perhaps something worse. When he danced with her, he held her too tightly. He always pressed her injured legs too close. She flinched, and he smiled like it pleased him. "Your strength is admirable," he said one night, lifting her hand to his lips. The others screamed far more. She blinked at him, slowly. The others, she wanted to ask what happened to them, but even if she could speak, she feared his answer would be gentle, kind, patient, and true. She returned to the tower room. The girl with the stitched mouth still rocked in place, her eyes cloudy with disuse. Her hair had begun to fall out. Seaweed had crept across her arms, curling like veins. This time, the mermaid stepped closer. When she placed a hand on the girl's knee, there was a faint tremble, a blink. The stitched mouth quivered. The girl tried to speak through her sealed lips. The kelp thread tugged. Blood welled. She was alive, still trapped, still under the same illusion. The spell must have unravelled for her too, the mermaid thought, but perhaps too slowly, too late. Her mind had gone soft, sunken, like driftwood. The mermaid touched her cheek and whispered inside her head, "I see you." The second body in the cellar was gone. In its place was a different girl, not hung, but wrapped in gauze and set upon a table like an offering. Her tail was visible, pale and scaly, ending in split flukes, rimmed with dried blood. Her chest was bare. Her eyes were sewn shut this time. Her hair had been brushed carefully, braided with pearls. The mermaid knew what she was looking at. This wasn't a corpse. It was a preservation, a trophy. Each girl, like her, had come ashore and broken apart slowly. Each had been kept, cleaned, arranged, remembered. She gripped the edge of the table until her fingers bled. The illusion strained. Her legs flickered. The wound where her tail had been felt fresh again. The sea witch's words came back to her. "He's a collector. You weren't the first. You won't be the last." But the mermaid wasn't ready to become a relic. She tried to leave that night. She waited until the castle was quiet, long past the witching hour, when even the haunted harp fell silent. She dragged herself across the stone, clutching the walls, ignoring the way her vision warped and her skin peeled in the dry air. The sea called to her. The tide was high. She could hear it beyond the cliffs. Freedom. She reached the servants' courtyard, past the stables, crossed the dew-wet grass, with every joint screaming. The pain didn't matter anymore. Only the water mattered. Then came the voice behind her. "Where are you going, little bride?" She turned. Prince Corwin stood barefoot on the cobblestones, wearing nothing but a silk nightshirt and a smile. In the moonlight, he looked like something carved from bone and shadow. "You'll catch cold," he said. She backed away, limping. Her heel split open on a sharp stone. The illusion flared. She almost dropped to her belly and crawled. "I thought we understood each other," He stepped forward. You gave up everything for me. You were perfect, beautiful, and now you want to run? She shook her head frantically. Don't lie, he said. Not to me. He raised one hand. A bell rang from the tower. The guards came, 2 of them, tall, silent. Their eyes were glazed over, like the girl in the tower, as if they, too, were dreaming through someone else's will. They seized her. She didn't fight, not really. Her limbs no longer obeyed her. Corwin watched her with a gentle sadness. Don't you see? He whispered as they dragged her back inside. I chose you. I've waited so long for the right one. They put her in the bathing chamber. The water steamed. Flowers floated on the surface, white and pink and delicate. Beneath them, she saw her reflection ripple. Not legs, never legs. Her tail was raw now, curled like a dying eel. The illusion was slipping too fast. She could feel the sea witch's magic tearing thread by thread, and soon he would see her clearly. He would no longer have the dream version of her, the illusion bride. What would he do then? Would he discard her? Or worse, preserve her? The tower girl began to sing. Only one note, a low, broken hum that barely echoed through the walls, but the mermaid heard it. She answered, not with her voice, still stolen, but with vibration. She pressed her palm to the stone and let her thoughts pulse outward like sonar. You're not alone. The girl hummed again, louder this time. Somewhere below, another voice joined, then another, 3, 4, 5. The mermaid realized then, this castle was full of them, girls like her, mermaids, sirens, daughters of the sea, who had given everything for love or longing or curiosity, and been collected, preserved, forgotten. She had to free them. That night, the prince visited her chamber. She lay motionless in the silk bed, her body curled tightly, trying to keep the illusion in place, just long enough to fool him. He sat beside her, tracing the line of her spine with 2 fingers. I always hoped one of you would stay, he murmured. So many visitors, so many failures. She didn't move. You're different, he said. You understand me. Then he leaned closer. You see what I see, don't you? She blinked. His face split, not with pain or rage, but with a grin so wide it cracked across his cheekbones. His eyes were no longer human. They were dark wells, echoing like the abyss. The sea witch hadn't cursed her to love the wrong man. She had cursed her to belong to the wrong thing. He was not human, not fully, not ever. That was the night she made her plan. It would take every ounce of strength she had left. She returned to the tower. The girl with the stitched mouth was still rocking.
The mermaid took a jagged shard of glass from her dressing mirror. With trembling hands, she cut the threads, one by one.
Blood poured. The girl gasped, then sobbed. Her voice was raw and broken, but it was hers again. Help me, the mermaid whispered, though her voice did not rise above a breath. Help all of us. The girl nodded. In the days that followed, the castle changed, not physically, not outwardly, but something in the walls began to crack. Servants glanced at each other too long. The music stopped at night. One of the guards vanished. The prince grew restless. He paced, muttered, watched the sea. The mermaid pretended still. She sat at his side, silent and lovely, while her sisters stirred beneath the floors and behind the walls. The spell was breaking. The collected were waking, and the prince was no longer in control. She dreamed again, not of the sea. This time she dreamed of a reef. It shimmered in the dark like polished obsidian, each spike of coral gleaming like a broken mirror. Voices whispered from within, faint and garbled, like they were speaking from behind walls of glass. When she looked down, she saw her own reflection scattered across the reef's surface, but in each shard she wore a different face. Some were hers, versions of her before the witch, before the illusion. Others were not. Other mermaids, other girls, all silent, all staring. One by one, the reflections opened their mouths. None had tongues. She woke gasping in the silk bed, her legs tangled in damp sheets, her skin peeled at the edges, scales bleeding through her illusion. She bit her knuckles to keep from sobbing. He was watching, not in the room, somewhere behind the walls. She felt him now, always close, always hungry. The illusion wasn't hiding her anymore. It was feeding him, his idea of beauty, fragility, ownership, the pain, the unravelling. That was part of the spell, not a flaw, a design. He wanted her in pieces. The girl from the tower was stronger now. They met in secret near the undercroft, a long forgotten hallway beneath the wine cellars. The girl no longer rocked or stared through walls. Her voice was rough but usable. "There are 6 of us," she said. 7, if you count the one who hums from the walls. She never comes out. I think her body's gone." The mermaid nodded. They spoke with gestures and glances more than words. Each carried bruises. Each bore the mark of the sea witch's illusion, now cracking like old paint. "I remember when I first saw him," the girl whispered. "I thought he was lost, sad, gentle." The mermaid closed her eyes. "Now I think he's just empty." The castle rotted from the inside out. No one saw it, no one living anyway, but the mermaid watched it begin. The tapestries began to twitch. Mice died in the walls. The mirrors grew foggy even when polished. The bathwater never stayed warm. The harp in the music hall plucked itself in minor keys. Then came the birds. One morning, the windowsills were filled with dead gulls. No wounds, no blood, just stiff, salt-burned corpses, staring inland with glassy eyes. The servants cleared them away in silence. When she tried to ask why, one maid only blinked at her and whispered, "He doesn't like the sound of wings." The girl in the tower had a name now. She remembered it. "Isolde," she said. She whispered it like a secret, like an apology. Isolde had been the first, or maybe the second. She couldn't remember anymore. Time moved strangely in the castle. They all blurred. Days curled into each other like fish circling a drain. There had been others before her, of course. Some hadn't made it past the garden. Some had jumped from the cliffs before the spell wore off. Some had gone quietly, lying down beside the prince and simply stopping. "We're not the first," Isolde said, "but we'll be the last." The mermaid returned to the reef in her dreams. This time it spoke, not in words, but in music, hums and clicks, the language of the deep, her own language. It vibrated through her bones. "You are one of many, but not like the others." She drifted closer. "You were not chosen. You were sent." She didn't understand. The sea sent you. It knew what he was. She woke with salt in her mouth. Real salt, not from the bathwater or the sea air. Brine, the taste of the deep, of home. The sea witch had told her she would forget things, that pain would wash away memories. But now, those memories rushed back like a current. She had been chosen, not by accident, not by fate, but by the reef, by something older than the sea witch, older than the prince. A voice older than time had whispered into the currents. "He collects. One day we will send one who remembers." That night she bled on purpose. She let the illusion falter fully. Her tail unfurled in a mess of torn fins and weeping scale. She curled in the centre of the bed, eyes locked on the ceiling, and whispered the reef's hum into the stone. The walls pulsed. The reef was listening. Corwin came at dawn. No guards, no smile. He looked tired, hollow-eyed. His gloves were gone. His nails were long, cracked at the edges, as though something beneath his skin was trying to climb out. "You're changing," he said. She didn't answer. "I thought we had more time." She stared at him, unblinking. He sat at her bedside, running a hand through his tangled hair. "You don't know what it's like," he said quietly. "Being alone, watching them leave, watching them rot. I keep them because I don't want to forget." His voice broke, just slightly. "I tried to love them. I did, but they kept fading. I didn't know how to make it last." He looked at her then, and for a moment, just a flicker, she saw something real. Not regret, not pain, desperation. Then it passed. "Maybe you'll be different." He leaned close. "I hope not." That night, the other girls came to her chamber, one by one. Isolde, the twin sisters with their arms bound in fish wire. The girl with sea glass teeth. The one with no tongue who now wore ribbons of eel skin for a voice. And the girl who should have been dead, the one who hummed in the walls, now pale and slick and moving like a thing half-birthed from the reef itself. Together they sat on the floor in silence. The mermaid peeled the illusion from her legs fully, revealing her raw tail. The others followed, flesh shed, bones cracked, scales surfaced. They looked like horrors from a drowned kingdom. They looked like truth, and for the first time in years, they began to sing. It was not music, it was calling, a chorus of grief and salt, of cracked illusions and stolen bodies. The castle shuddered beneath it, mirrors burst, blood leaked from the keyholes. The reef was coming. Corwin screamed, not in pain, but in fury. He stormed the halls barefoot, his body flickering between forms. Man, monster, shadow. The guards crumbled. The servants ran. Paintings blackened. The sea surged against the cliffs, like it wanted in. He found the girls gathered in the great hall, singing still. "You don't get to leave," he shouted. They ignored him. He lunged for the mermaid. She did not flinch, because behind her the glass reef had bloomed. It rose from the sea like a cathedral of knives, crashing through the cliffs and bleeding light. Shards of coral twisted into arches and teeth, pulsating with memory. Reflections of every girl he'd ever taken blinked from the reef's mirrored surface, and then they stepped out, not as corpses, as revenants. They had come home. Corwin fell to his knees. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The mermaid touched his face, gently, and then she sang her true name, the one he was never meant to hear. It split his mind like a net splits a drowning body. He wept and bled and forgot everything. The reef claimed him, folded him into its black cathedral like a statue, frozen mid-scream. The castle crumbled behind them. The girls, now whole, now sea-bound, returned to the water, except the mermaid. She stood at the edge, her tail flickering like flame, her body burning with old magic. She was not sent to return. She was sent to end him. Now, her story was hers again. The castle was gone, where once stood turrets and stained glass windows. There remained only a field of charred stone and salt-slick ruins. The sea had swallowed it, not in a wave, but in a slow, creeping tide that turned wood to rot and mortar to dust. And at its centre, where the ballroom once glittered with candlelight, bloomed the reef. It stretched toward the sky in silence. Glassy spires twisted upward, catching moonlight like prisms. Between them, shadows moved. Girls with tails of bone and coral hair, swimming through air as if it were water. They did not speak, they did not weep. They were what came after sorrow. The mermaid watched from the cliffside. Her body still shimmered with remnants of the illusion, though it peeled more each day. She no longer bled from her steps. She no longer woke screaming, but she also no longer dreamed. There was peace in that, and also something else, an ache, a question, with no mouth to voice it. Now what? The others had returned to the deep. Isolde kissed her forehead before diving into the reef. Her tail gleaming with barnacle-white patterns, the sea called sacred. The sisters twined together like kelp strands and vanished into a coral archway. The tongueless girl, now radiant with bioluminescent veins, swam through the roots of the reef, and smiled with her eyes. They had purpose now. They had their sea again, but the mermaid did not dive. She remained on land, not out of choice, but out of pull. Something still tethered her to the place where her illusion had died and her truth had been reborn. She wandered through the wreckage. Her legs were almost useless now, her tail stiff and heavy, dragging behind her like the spine of a dead serpent. But she moved, slowly, surely. The air was thinner without the prince's presence. The rot had faded. The scent of blood and candle wax was gone. Even the ghosts had quieted, but the salt remained. It clung to every surface, seeped from every crack in the stone. It was not sea salt. It was older, bitter, black. It had come from the prince, from whatever he'd truly been. A remnant of the thing beneath the illusion. She found the mirror chamber on the third day, beneath layers of collapsed stone and rusted iron. It still shimmered, barely. A circle of 12 full-length mirrors, each framed in obsidian and bone, stood untouched. Dust hovered in the air like ash. Each mirror held a different reflection. Each was a lie. She stepped before the first. In it, she saw herself as the prince had once seen her. Beautiful, mute, fragile, legs unscarred, eyes full of longing. She moved to the next. Here, she wore a wedding gown woven from sea foam, veil trailing like a jellyfish crown. She was smiling, but her teeth were bleeding. Another showed her with a child in her arms, half fish, half boy, weeping black brine. Another showed her stitched into the reef, mouth open in eternal song. She moved past them all until she reached the last. In this one, she saw herself as she was, tail torn, spine arched, skin flaking like kelp husk, eyes burned out from too many illusions. But she was standing, and in the reflection behind her, the reef bloomed like a crown. She touched the glass. It cracked just once, and the spell, what remained of it, broke fully. Her voice returned, not all at once. It came as a rattle, then a breath, then a note, like a seashell struck against stone. Her first true word emerged not from her throat, but from her bones. Mine. The mirrors shattered. That night, the reef opened. It pulsed with bioluminescence, its arches widening into cathedral doors of spined coral and silver anemone. The tide surged upward, not crashing, but crawling, wrapping the cliffs in water that did not fall away. The reef had accepted her waiting. Now it called her, but she did not dive. She turned inland. There were still others. She saw them now. Girls in distant villages, voices that echoed through wells and forests, each singing soft, broken lullabies the sea had forgotten. Some were just beginning to change, bruises on their ankles, dreams full of waves. Some had been taken and did not know it yet. Some had bartered away their hearts to shadows, who smiled with too many teeth. The prince had not worked alone. He was a collector, but he had been taught to collect, and the sea's wound was wider than just one man. She followed the salt path. It led away from the sea through bramble and fog until it reached a chapel half swallowed by vines. The windows were filled with depictions of angels, but their wings were wrong, featherless, skeletal. Their halos were hooks, and behind the altar, a statue. It resembled the prince, but it was not him. It was older, taller, smiling, and behind its back it held a leash made of golden thread, tied to dozens of women, all of them smiling, all of them rotting. The mermaid touched the statue's heart. It was warm. It beat. She screamed, not a human scream, but the full call of the deep, the pressure of the trench, the hymn of the reef, the language the sea witch had buried. The reef had remembered, and the prince had feared. The chapel cracked, the vine shriveled, the stained glass wept, and the statue split down the middle. Inside it, bones, hundreds of them, hollowed and polished, each engraved with a name. She touched one. It pulsed. The name sank into her skin, and with it came a memory, a girl with hair like sea foam and a laugh that bubbled, taken from the shore, given legs, broken, forgotten. She touched another name, another pain, another life. She wept then, because they had not been lost. They had been stored, catalogued like shells in a drawer. The reef had sent her not to avenge, but to reclaim. She built an altar in the ruin, not to worship, to remember. Bones, stones, shattered glass, and salt, each piece placed with purpose, each name whispered, each girl called back, even if only in voice, and the reef answered. It sent her shells full of songs, starfish like medallions, pearls that wept blood and whispered secrets. It crowned her in coral and gave her a new name, Calthea, she who remembers. The chapel fell after the 13th night, crumbled into a pit of brine and bone. The altar sank with it, but the names remained. They had been carved into her flesh by then, ritual tattoos made of salt and ink, a living list, a ledger of suffering. And the prince's was last, but not alone. Other names followed, others like him. Caeltea walked on. The reef followed. It did not crawl nor grow. It mirrored itself wherever she went. Where her shadow fell, water followed, coral split earth, glass bloomed from tree trunks, statues bled brine. She was the sea's wound now, walking, open, singing, and the world would remember what had been taken. She couldn't feel her legs anymore, not because they were numb, but because the illusion had started to slip. A thin crack had split down the side of her calf 2 days ago. She had tried to hide it beneath cloth, to wrap it tightly, but no matter how many layers she added, the wetness soaked through. A trail of dark ichor dripped onto the castle floors when she walked. The servants avoided her now, whispering, muttering, eyes wide when they thought she wasn't looking. They saw something she didn't, or perhaps they saw something she refused to see. Still, the prince smiled at her, and that was enough for now. The castle was grand, yes, but wrong. It smelled like fish bones left too long in the sun, even though the windows were always open. Paintings of women lined the halls, beautiful women with long necks and haunted eyes, all of them painted in shades of coral and grey. Some bore vague resemblance to her, and once she asked about them. The prince only chuckled. Past companions, friends from my travels. He didn't elaborate. That night, she dreamed she was a painting, her arms folded primly, her skin flaking like damp canvas, her eyes forever stuck, staring forward. She woke screaming, days blurred. The court admired her beauty, though their compliments seemed rehearsed, stilted. The queen mother, regal and cold, never once addressed her by name, only the girl, or worse, it. She clung to the prince, and he was so kind. He never flinched at her limping walk, or the way she trembled with each step. When she bled through her dress at supper, he tucked her hand into his, smiling at the guests as if nothing were wrong. "You're transforming beautifully," he whispered afterward, as he helped her back to her chambers. She wanted to ask, transforming into what? One morning, a servant girl tried to speak to her. It was early, the light barely breaking over the sea. The servant entered with linens, paused, and stared. The mermaid stood by the window, her hair unbrushed, her face pale and bruised, and her legs. What legs? The girl's mouth dropped. Your Highness, you're bleeding from the... And then the prince was there. He appeared from behind the curtain, serene, shirtless, calm. He placed a hand on the servant's shoulder and said, "You shouldn't be here." The girl didn't scream. She only trembled as he led her away. The next day, a new servant replaced her. That evening, he took the mermaid to the gardens. "They bloom at night," he said, leading her through winding hedges into a greenhouse of moonflowers and star-shaped vines. "Most don't get to see this, but you're not most, are you?" She didn't know what to say. "You're special," he continued. "I knew it from the moment I found you on the shore." He brushed her hair behind her ear. "Do you know why I knew your name?" She looked at him, startled. She had never told him her name. She had no voice, but when he first touched her, he had said it aloud. Her true name, the one her sisters used, the one the sea witch had stolen. "I heard it from the others," he said now, smiling too widely. "They screamed it when they drowned." Her heart dropped. He laughed at her expression. "Oh, not yours, not exactly, but close. Do you think you're the first? They all come eventually. They all want to be human, to walk, to love." He leaned closer. "And they all find me." She stumbled backward, heart pounding. "No," he asked gently. "You don't believe me?" He touched her face. "Have you never wondered why the sea witch gave you what you asked for without a price? No blood pact, no warning, no riddles. She didn't even ask for your voice. It was just gone." He grinned. "She sent you to me." Her skin felt too tight. Her bones ached beneath the illusion of skin. She could feel her tail beneath it all now, coiled and shivering, desperate to be free. The prince took her hand. "You're almost ready." That night, she tried to run. She made it as far as the chapel doors before her legs gave out, or rather, the illusion cracked completely. Her calves split open like overripe fruit, the skin sloughing off to reveal slick, dark fin beneath. Scales glimmered wetly on the stone floor. She dragged herself forward, sobbing silently until she reached the altar. There, she looked up. The stained glass window above her did not show saints. It showed the sea, and in it dozens, no, hundreds of mermaids, twisted, broken, suspended in blue. Their eyes were open, all of them, watching. She collapsed. The prince found her there hours later. She expected rage, but he only knelt beside her, brushing the hair from her face with a reverent tenderness. "Don't be afraid," he whispered. "This pain, it's only the last step. You're shedding, becoming." "Becoming what?" He didn't say. He only carried her back to her room. He didn't call for help. He laid her down in the bath, warm water swirling red around her limbs, and kissed her forehead. "It will be over soon." He whispered a name into her ear, not hers, but close, very close. When she woke the next day, the mirror was gone. There were no clothes in her wardrobe, only a long blue dress with no back, slit wide down the middle. Tail room, she thought, or maybe to make dragging easier. The prince visited once that day, just after sunset. "You're almost finished," he said, eyes gleaming. "I've waited so long. This will be perfect." Then he kissed her hand and left. She curled beneath the blankets, the memory of scales crawling beneath her skin, the feeling of glass eyes staring from beneath the sea. She wept. No sound, just salt. There was salt in her eyes again. It came not from the sea, but from her own sweating skin, dripping into her lashes as she pressed her palms to the stone floor of her chamber. Her wrists were rubbed raw, her knees torn open. The white muslin dress she wore was stained with old blood and wet grime from her nightly journeys. Her fingers were bent like hooked coral, clawing against the uneven floorboards. She didn't remember crawling across. The dreams were no longer limited to sleep. They spilled into waking hours now, blackening the light. When she blinked, she saw the sea witch's grin hiding behind the curves of the wallpaper, and the prince's blue eyes would morph into glass orbs, dead things, floating where his pupils should be. She was breaking. She knew it in the way her jaw no longer aligned quite right when she tried to smile. The way her voice scratched inside her throat when she attempted to hum. Her silence was no longer a gift given, it was decay, a rot that started in her soul and now infected every motion, every moment. The servants whispered about her. She'd heard them through the walls. She leaves trails of salt on the floor. She smells like the ocean, doesn't sleep, doesn't eat. She scratches the doors at night like a dog. They no longer looked her in the eye, not even the kindest among them. Even the prince's nurses avoided her, but he didn't. He never did. He watched her with the same delighted hunger he always had, as if every new crack in her spirit was another blossom in a bouquet made just for him. That morning, he brought her down the black staircase. It spiraled below the castle, past the wine cellars, and into damp, forgotten halls, where the walls breathed like flesh. The torches didn't burn. They hissed, flickering with blue fire, casting light that made her skin look bruised and veined. He held her hand, gently, reverently. Each time she stumbled, he caught her, then stared at the blood left on the stairs from her bare feet, as if it pleased him deeply. "I've waited so long," he whispered, brushing her sea-slick hair from her temple. "They never last this long." That word again. They. She tried to ask, but her tongue scraped the roof of her mouth and no sound emerged. Her throat was dry as bone, as if she'd been screaming all night in some dark place beyond memory. "You deserve to see them," he said. "You deserve to meet your sisters." The door at the bottom was made of bone, not driftwood, not iron, bone. Fused ribs overlapped in arcs, bound together by ropes of braided hair, bleached white by salt and time. Some of it still shimmered with traces of the sea. He pushed it open with his fingertips and stepped inside. She followed and saw herself. No, not herself, but others like her. The room was circular, lined with alcoves carved into the stone. Each alcove held a figure. Some sat primly on cushions of faded velvet. Others lay crumpled in odd positions. But all were unmistakably mermaids, or had been. Each bore a different face, a different expression. Fear, rage, sorrow, but all wore gowns similar to hers, some finer, some ragged, some still bore tiaras on their heads, or pearls tangled in their hair, but they all shared one truth. They had legs, real ones, or at least they appeared to, until she looked closer. The legs were stitched from eel skin, packed with sea sponge, wrapped in netting and dried flesh. Some were hollow, filled with crushed shells that clinked faintly as the bodies were moved, perhaps by breath, perhaps by the living walls. "You were the most perfect one," the prince said behind her. "The best imitation yet." She turned to him. Her legs gave way, not from shock, but because she finally saw what she truly was. She didn't fall like a girl. She collapsed like a bag of wet meat, bones grinding out of place, arms flailing at angles that shouldn't have existed. The illusion was dying, and now she could feel the truth of her tale beneath the skin, a tale torn into shreds and forced into human form, stretched over with falsehoods like parchment over driftwood. Her eyes rolled back, and the room screamed. No, it was her screaming from her mouth, a sound, an unholy pitch between a conscious shriek and a dying animal, ripped through the chamber, bouncing off the walls, echoing until her ears bled. The other mermaids joined in. Their bodies did not move, but their mouths hung open, each hollow scream wove with hers, each pitch matched her despair. The prince stepped forward and kissed her forehead. "You'll be quiet again soon," he promised. "You always are." That night, she awoke in her bed. Her legs were smooth again, the illusion restored, but she knew better now. They were legs only while he watched, only while she played the game. Every movement, every meal, every nod of her head, all performance. And if she broke the illusion again, if she let herself see the tail dragging behind her, if she heard the clatter of bones behind the door at the bottom of the stairs, she would never escape. But escape was a myth. The sea was no longer her home. The sea was inside her now, flooding her dreams, filling her lungs, and waiting for her to stop pretending, waiting for her to come back. The moon had risen 3 times since she last saw the prince. In the mirrored ballroom of the castle, the walls still glowed with candlelight, and the floor remained slick from the last waltz, but no music played now. The servants walked stiffly, their movements jerky, and their eyes unfocused. Some whispered to themselves in cracked voices. Others wandered the halls in pairs, holding hands like children lost in a dark forest. She sat in her usual chair by the tall window, staring out at the black ocean. In her mind, her legs were crossed delicately beneath the folds of her seafoam dress, bare toes brushing against the smooth marble. But her tail, flayed and torn, oozed salt water onto the floor, bloodless but raw. She could feel it now, not always, not constantly, but sometimes. In the cracks of her illusion, the pain crept in, a brief sting, a pulling sensation. The moment her gaze wandered too far from a reflection, she caught a glimpse of her true form in shadow, a flicker of the truth, and the truth hurt. The castle was no longer safe. She heard things behind the doors, soft clicking noises, like claws on stone, something breathing behind walls that shouldn't have lungs. And once, while descending a staircase, she passed a room with no door. Only a silk curtain hung loosely in the archway. She paused. She shouldn't have. She peeked inside. The floor was damp, covered in a shallow pool of water. A chandelier hung low, dripping constantly. In the centre, posed like a statue, stood a figure that looked like her, another mermaid. But this one had no eyes. They had been gouged out cleanly, the sockets empty but preserved, her mouth sewn into a soft smile. Her tail had been arranged beneath her like a coiled serpent, and pearls lined her ribs like a corset. A doll. She stumbled backward and fled, her body dragging along the tiles, flippers slapping in wild rhythm. But when she told the prince what she had seen, he only took her hand and kissed it gently. "Memory is cruel," he whispered. "You were delirious with fever that night. There's no such room." His eyes were warm, but beneath them lived something else, a hunger, a calculation. She began to understand that he was always watching, not lovingly, not even lustfully, but like a collector watches a rare, delicate thing behind glass, admiring, possessive, unwilling to release it. The illusion was thinning. She felt it, and yet, still, she couldn't let go of it. Every day she walked, no, crawled, through the garden. The ground was cold beneath her body. Stones scraped her skin, and small insects clung to her damp flesh. Yet, in her mind, she strolled barefoot along the gravel, arms raised to brush the flowers. She often imagined herself singing, but the sound that escaped her throat was not music. It was a wet rasp, like wind through hollow reeds. One evening, she found the old maid again, the woman who had first brushed her hair by the fire, who hummed the tune of a lullaby that didn't exist in any world she remembered. The woman was bent over the fountain, washing her hands. When she saw the girl, her mouth twitched, and she dropped the cloth into the water. The old woman looked around cautiously before leaning in. "You've been here too long," she said, barely audible. "It's feeding on you." The mermaid blinked. Her vision swam. "The prince," she croaked. The woman shook her head. "The castle." That night, she saw it. The truth she tried so hard to ignore. She passed the hall of portraits again. The ones that lined the corridor had begun to change. Once elegant paintings of royal ancestors now bore strange features, elongated eyes, mouths filled with too many teeth, hair that curled like seaweed. One portrait near the end had once depicted a young bride in a red veil. Now, the veil hung in tatters, and behind it, the woman's face was smooth, completely blank, like a porcelain doll before painting. And beneath her, in elegant script, the name read, Anemone. Her heart stuttered. She remembered Anemone. She had been one of the merfolk, soft-spoken, gentle, beautiful in the way sea foam is beautiful before it disappears. The sea witch had whispered once that Anemone too had dreamed of legs. "She made her wish," said a voice behind her. The mermaid turned. The prince stood in the shadowed archway. He didn't smile. "She believed herself the first," he said, stepping forward. "They all do." He circled her slowly, his boots silent on the carpet. She tried to move, but her limbs were uncooperative, bound to her illusion like shackles. Her mind screamed to flee. Her tail trembled. She thought the world above would welcome her, that her voice would be heard, but she bled out in the ballroom. He knelt beside her. brushing her cheek with one gloved hand. I keep her memory safe. Don't you think that's kind? The mermaid gasped, trying to crawl away. He didn't stop her, just followed, quiet, calm, speaking as if they were conversing over tea. You never asked how I understood your speech, he said. The sea's tongue is not easily learned, but I have heard it many times. She reached the mirror at the end of the hallway and hoisted herself up. In its surface, she saw her imagined reflection. Long legs, perfect posture, flowing gown. But just below the glass, something else shimmered through. Her true body, bloodied tail, flesh torn by coral, fingers raw from clawing at stone. Her mouth opened, and black water spilled out, staining the hem of her dress. You are dying, the prince said, almost reverently. You just haven't accepted it yet. Behind him, the candles flickered. I made a place for you, for all of you. Here, you can live forever, beautiful, preserved. He took something from his coat, a comb, silver, shaped like the spine of a fish. He extended it toward her. Let me help you remember. She took it. Her hand moved on its own, raising the comb toward her scalp. The moment it touched, pain lanced through her skull, not physical, but deeper, a ripping sensation, like something inside her was being pulled apart. The illusion faltered entirely. Now she saw it, the rot along her side, the missing chunks of her tail, the flayed muscle where she once imagined toes. The walls around her changed. No longer marble and glass, but fleshy and damp, like the insides of a mouth. The castle pulsed, breathed. It wasn't made of stone. It was something else. Living, feeding. The prince stood at the centre of it, and for one terrible moment, his form flickered. His face, no longer fully human, his eyes too dark, his smile too wide, hands too many. She screamed. It was not a sound anyone would call beautiful, but it was hers, and it shattered something. The comb dropped, her vision blurred, her hands trembled. The corridor twisted, shifting. Doors appeared where none had been. One opened, and behind it she saw an expanse of black sea, churning, furious. The ocean was calling her. The mermaid dragged herself toward it, away from the prince, away from the castle's breathing walls. Every inch she moved left a smear of her behind, but she did not stop. The prince did not follow. He watched, with disappointment, with longing. You'll be back, he said softly. You all return. When the sea forgets you, I will remember. The door closed behind her, and the waves took her. The wind howled through the cracks of the tower, as if the sea had followed her inland, whispering in long, briny sighs against the stone. Ahela pressed her fingers to the grooves in the stone wall, still slick with the mossy dampness of the sea air. Every step felt wrong, off-balanced, like her body swayed to some invisible tide. Blood trailed behind her in dull smears, but she couldn't feel the pain anymore. It wasn't numbness, it was that she had begun to forget what pain even was. The door at the end of the hall stood open now. No guards, no flickering sconces, just that enormous black door, yawning like a mouth in the stone. Inside, the scent hit her first. Not rot, not death, but salt and lilac, sweet and delicate, like something blooming underwater. The floor was polished black glass, reflecting every shimmer of her broken form. Her scales were peeling away in cracked patches. The silk of the gown hung in ruin. Her arm bent too far back now, elbow disjointed from when she had fallen, and still she crawled. There was a glass dome in the centre of the room, tall as a man, gold trim at its base, and inside, her, or rather a version of her. The girl inside was immaculate. Ayala stared through the curved glass at herself, a self with long red hair falling in waves, legs crossed delicately beneath a silk gown of opal white. Her lips were untouched, her eyes glistened with life. She smiled, but not at her. She smiled at the prince, who stood beside the glass, hand resting atop the dome like it was his most prized possession. "She's prettier than I expected," Ayala whispered. He turned to her slowly. "You look tired," he said gently. "Come sit, I'll explain everything." Ayala dragged herself forward. Her tail flopped heavily behind her, dried fins crackling like parchment. Her hands were almost skeletal now. The salt had taken her fingers, leaving webbing and bone. She could barely blink, but she raised her head and stared up at him. "Is that me?" The prince smiled. "That is what you wanted to be. I gave you the illusion because you would never have survived this place otherwise. Not with the truth." She choked on something, her own laugh. "You lied. I showed you kindness," he said. "That's more than most are afforded in this world. You wanted love. You wanted beauty. I gave you both." "She's not real." "Neither are you," he replied, without malice. "Not anymore." Behind the dome, the girl moved. Not much, a slight tilt of her head, but Ayala saw it. "I remember being her," she said. The prince nodded. "You still can be." He stepped aside and gestured toward the golden pedestal. "Enter." Her ruined hands scraped against the floor as she tried to lift herself. Her tail twitched. She could hear the creak of the dome as it unlocked, golden trim shifting, metal teeth drawing back. "Why?" she asked. "Why do this?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Because I need you to stay, all of you." And suddenly she saw them, the walls, the glass, the domes, dozens of them. Hundreds. Each one held a girl, all slightly different. One had black hair and wore a crown of thorns. Another had no mouth. One was smiling at nothing. Another screamed soundlessly, her voice trapped forever. Their dresses were stained, their eyes empty, their bodies still, but their faces, they were all her. Ayala tried to back away, The pain returned all at once, her tail splitting open, blood spilling from old scars, her bones grinding against the floor. Her body was unravelling, flesh too long denied, skin that had rotted under the illusion, her voice lost.
But she remembered now.
She remembered how she had danced for him, how he had fed her honeyed words and bound her with silk. She remembered the dreams where she saw herself from outside, floating, smiling, watching other brides get locked in place. She remembered the others, and she remembered the sea. "Why us?" she hissed. "Why mermaids?" The prince knelt beside her. "Because you come willingly." She struck, not with her hands. They were useless now. She struck with her tail, the rotted fin slapping the ground hard enough to unbalance him. He stumbled back, and she dragged herself to the base of the dome. The other Aella, the pretty one, watched her, still smiling, still perfect. "Get out," Aella whispered. "Get out of my face." She pulled herself upright, rising with shaking bones, her fingers leaving blood prints on the glass. And then she sang. It wasn't a song of beauty or longing. It was hers, the voice that had been taken, the real sound beneath the illusion. A croak at first, then a screech, then a warbled guttural tone that throbbed through the glass. The dome cracked. Inside, the pretty Aella turned to her, smile faltering, her hand pressed to the inner glass, and for the first time she looked afraid. Aella screamed louder, voice shredding as the dome shattered inward with a shriek of splintering crystal. Glass sliced her cheek. The perfect Aella collapsed like a broken puppet, silk soaked in blood, face cracking apart like porcelain. There was no brain inside, no organs, just coral and seaweed, tangled in a skeletal frame. A doll, a trophy. She turned to the prince. He was running. She dragged herself after him. Behind her, the room groaned. The other domes were shaking now. Cracks spread like veins across the glass. The air pulsed with song, not just hers, but dozens of voices rising. The silent brides were waking. "Help me," the prince called to the guards, but none came. Only the voices answered. Aella pulled herself through the halls. Mirrors shattered as she passed. Her reflection was gone. There was no her anymore. Only vengeance. Only the truth. She found him on the steps of the tower, scrambling for the drawbridge controls. He looked back once, just once, and she opened her mouth. Her true voice poured out, a siren song drowned in blood and brine. It wasn't meant to lure, it was meant to destroy. The prince's ears bled. He collapsed, screaming, trying to claw the sound out of his skull. His eyes rolled, his limbs twitched, and then he stilled. Behind her the tower crumbled. One by one the dome shattered. The air bloomed with the cries of 100 brides no longer silent. The illusion collapsed in on itself. The sea surged up the cliffs, hungry and wide. Ella let the water take her. Her body dissolved, her soul scattered. She was not a girl, not a mermaid.
She was a song that couldn't be caged.
And deep in the reef where coral had once grown, a new melody began, low, sad and furious.